I'm Anita Westerbroek. I'm Energy Innovations Manager at CEPI. That's the Confederation of the European Pulp and Paper Industries. And me, myself, I'm really convinced that heat pumps are crucial to decarbonize our industry. And it is my task to convince you and convince my members too. So that is also why I am here, because I'm really happy to meet all the people that can help us to do that, but also can help our industry to realize it. So, I think it's more important to introduce my panelists. So I have Andrea Barbon from Turboden, Christian Strand from Danfoss, and José La Loggia from Train Technologies. But we also have a person online, Dave Dorney from Johnson Controls. Can you hear us?
I can indeed. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, Anita. Thanks for having me join this session.
Yes, thank you for having you in too. And yeah, I got a whole CV of all of you, but I think I can summarize that you all have a very long experience in heating and cooling. You all have experience with large projects. And you all are also responsible for strategy and innovation and performance. And at least 2 of you have an engineering background, but I hope all of you. Because that is, I think, what I like most from most of the people here is that most of you have a real engineering background and do not talk about heat pumps because it's in the interest of your company, because you are really believing that this is the future. And that's what I really like. So starting from this, I would like you to introduce yourself, not by saying who you are, but what you think is the main message to people that should implement heat pumps, people in the room, but especially industry. What is your main message? Not more than 1 to 2 sentences, please. Andrea, you can start.
Oh, okay. I will present an example, a business case I was evaluating a few months ago. Chemical industry, they call us, please come here, we would like to implement heat pump. We came there, very good potential, so the heat demand
That was 2 sentences.
A couple of sentences.
No, you can introduce your case later.
Okay, case
One
later.
message, please.
Okay, so market awareness for large-scale heat pumps, even in high temperature, and then rethinking about process, industrial process, in order to apply heat pumps.
Think about the process.
Yes.
Thank you. Christian, your main message.
I will try in 2 sentences. So
can we get
Can you hear me? Hello? Yeah? Okay, good. I will try in 2 sentences. So if we want to achieve the targets that we have set out, we need to decarbonize, and we need to remember the industry, and we need to decarbonize in an energy efficient way. So that will be my...
In an energy efficient way. Well, I like to hear that. Thank you, thank you. And Jose?
Yes, I think there's a huge opportunity in the industrial space and the large commercial space. And I think what's happening is a convergence of technologies, right? So we have to think of this not just as heating, but heating and what we call at Train Technologies thermal systems. And I'll talk a little bit about that as we go through the discussion today.
Thank you. And Dave?
Yes, thank you, Anita. I guess what I would say, my advice that I would give is that there is a broad range of technologies with regards to heat pumps, from application perspective and a technology perspective. Also, when you look at refrigerants, I think my advice would be understand the problem that you're looking to solve and solve, and then you will find the right application to best fit your needs in order to drive that through sustainable solution.
I like that statement. Understand the problem before you start solving it. That's
correct.
Really a good one. Well, then that also brings me to, because what I hear and I also see in the videos is that heat pumps are quite often connected to residential heating. And even if we talk about industry and heat pumps, they often see heat pumps like, okay, we will disconnect the heat from the industry and bring it to the district. Is this correct, Christian?
No, I definitely don't think that's correct. We have industrial heat pumps that can really be, you could say, integrator of the system, because you have multiple sources of heat that you can take in. And if I can just give one example, then we have at Danfoss committed to be carbon neutral in our global operations in 2030. So already this year we will be carbon neutral in our head office in Norborg, and that's around 3,500 people in production. And we have managed, by reuse and reduce and resource, we have managed to take heating demand down by 70% and the power down by 43%.
In your own production facilities?
In our own production and our own offices.
Oh,
that is to a large
really
extent by
example.
using big heat pumps, right? So we have the technologies there, it's ready.
Yeah, and then maybe Jose, what should we do to remove this hurdle of misperception that it is only for district heating?
Well, I think, as our good friend from Johnson Controls said, we need to understand the problem first, right? And if I think about our business, we have a very big business in selling cooling equipment, but I can guarantee you in every industrial customer that we have, that we sell chiller plants to, they also have a boiler plant. And we need to start the discussion with those customers to say, look, the future is not to have a siloed chiller plant and boiler plant. The future is to have a convergence of those two plants into one, what we call a thermal system plant. And then the efficiency gains, they're tremendous, right? You're not talking about incremental efficiency gains. You're talking about step changes in efficiency. But the whole industry needs to change in that way. And also I think regulators can help in changing also that perception, because today most regulation is really focused on how do we improve cooling efficiency or how do I improve heating efficiency. But we need to start to see regulation that looks at heating and cooling efficiencies combined.
But how are we going to, because maybe Dave, you can say, how are we going to inform the industry about the opportunities?
An interesting point, Anita, and I think in part, firstly, we must take some of the mystery out of this, and as some of the speakers have already referred to, you know, today maybe the perception is that a boiler or fossil fuel source is the only way of generating heating or a hot water requirement. And that's not the case. A heat pump technology, effectively as it's cooling, needs to reject that heat, and that heat is a viable source. And so we should think about where are those other viable sources that we can capture that heat today that's going to atmosphere, which is effectively what's causing this increase in temperature that we're really anxious in order to reduce from a COP27, from a Paris Convention perspective. And so my advice would be, let's take the mystery out of it. Let's speak in a very common language that customers and clients can understand what it is that they're looking to achieve, and do that again in the most viable way using technology that's available. When you have a cooling need, you will have a heating solution that's readily available to you.
Yeah, that brings me also to waste heat. So if I talk to my companies, a lot of them often say, we don't have waste heat. What is waste heat? Andrea, what is waste heat?
Waste heat is something which is common in the industry, especially. It comes to different temperature level, could be very low, typically cooling water, 20, 30 degrees, but then the primary source is typically much higher in temperature.
So you say that 20 degrees can already be waste heat?
Oh, this is waste
we
heat.
are emitting things of 60 degrees, so
but this
what is that? Not waste heat?
No, it is waste heat, and industry need to really think about how to use it directly, if not possible, to reheat it again by means of, for example, heat pumps. So,
yeah. So you say that even if we would emit something of 20 degrees, we can reuse it?
For sure.
Well, then there's definitely something to tell to the industry. So, but anyhow, you wanted to tell about your case. Now it's time. Now it's time, Andrea. Tell.
I missed the proper moment previously.
No problem.
No, it was quite curious since a specific industry, chemical industry, large scale one, we came there saying, okay, we would like to apply our heat pump. Okay, we have office heating. Okay, but what about the process? No, process is not possible because we need 200 degrees steam. Are you sure of that? We can provide the solutions up to 200. But then we look in detail and the real demand, the final usage was under 30 degrees. The heat source, that cooling water at 20, 30 degrees in reality was a primary source about 100 degrees. So at the end, the business case was more like you need to give heat 130 degrees, for sure challenging but feasible, and you have an heat source at 80 degrees. So the COP, the efficiency of the system was coming from not applicable to 1.5, and then finally 4 to 5.
Oh, wow.
So a good business case.
And did you realize it?
Not yet.
Not yet. When are you going to realize it?
Soon. I would like to inform you.
Is there still a hurdle?
No, it's an ongoing opportunity, but what I discovered is that industry need to rethink about the process if they want to apply heat pumps, if they want to decarbonize.
Yeah, well, that's good. But how much energy can they save?
I would say for sure the one they are wasting now, and they just need to add the electricity to fuel the heat pump, which is much less compared to the equivalent final energy usage in fossil fuel. Yeah. And more than that, the second point I have for also my colleagues, suppliers of heat pump, is that we need to think about going over our boundaries. So the traditional temperature of 90 degrees, 100 degrees need to be exceeded up to the real limit of the technology in order to help this decarbonization.
But yeah, we can of course also combine it with some steam compression. So anything is possible already. Yes. And so we can go as high as possible in that case.
Just maybe on that, Anita, if you don't mind, I could come in there, because I think you've raised a very valid point there. And you know what I touched on earlier about trying to understand the problem you solve. And again, as I listened to the panel and Andrea, what he shared, today customers are heating or they're generating hot water or steam and running that around their complete facility, and maybe only needed in a very small part. And we spoke about steam generation, we spoke about high temperature hot water. And again, the advice to customers today is understand your process side, or understand where your thermal load is coming from. So what is it that you're producing? And perhaps even decoupling those, rather than running high temperature around your entire facility, can mean that you can have a heat pump running at lower temperature application for 80% of your load. Yeah. So and then have a very specialist decoupled system, like you say, maybe gas compression system, that can give you steam for 15 or 20% of your load, as opposed to trying to do that in one system. And that is, I think, a quick win, but also an important message that I would share, that truly understand if you need that high temperature and you need that application in your entire facility, or can you decouple those?
No, that's true. Well, and that's also our experience, that, well, at least also thanks to Thomas in this, because if you go to a paper mill, they will quite often ask for 15 or 20 bars of steam. But, well, if you really ask them what they need and what they use, then they use, well, much lower pressures. Most of the most steam is used at lower pressures, and that is possible with heat pumps. And then for some of the higher pressures, you can use some steam compression. So it is crucial to ask them. But I also experience that they quite often don't know what a heat pump is, how it works, and why it should help them. What is your experience in that? Maybe Christian?
Yeah, well, now we don't have the end customers as such, so maybe pass it on to Jose.
Okay, so I think I can give a very, let's say, simple example here. And I'll talk about, because sometimes the questions are, is it in my geography it's not going to work, or in my application it's not going to work, and everything is not going to work, right? But I can tell you it always works. So I'm going to talk about a tomato grower in the desert in the UAE. I'm going to talk about a pet food maker in southern France, and I'm going to talk about a chocolate manufacturer in Poland. So these are three different industries, completely different, all things that you can eat except for the pet food. But these are all customers that we have traditionally sold chiller plants to. But in the last few years, as we've seen this convergence of heating and cooling into thermal systems, we started to ask these customers, you know, what do you have heating in your process? You have boilers there. So these three customers, they moved away from using cooling equipment that was rejecting heat while a boiler was burning fossil fuels to create heat, to what we call a thermal system. So the tomato grower in the UAE, he changed his chillers to like what we call a thermal system, which can be a combination of heat pumps and other types of machinery. And now they have an electrical system which produces heating and cooling for all their tomato growing needs. The same thing happened at the pet food factory in France, and the same thing happened at the chocolate factory in Italy. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. These are 3 examples, but there's thousands of these things
And
all
how much
over
energy
Europe.
did they save?
They saved a lot of energy because...
And what is a lot?
I'll tell you, because I'll tell you, Anita, I'll tell you. So typically, when you have a chiller plant and a boiler plant, if you look at it a very simple way, for every unit of energy you put into a boiler, you get, let's say, theoretically 1 unit of heat. And in a chiller plant, for every unit of energy you put into that chiller, you get 3 units of cooling. So if I combine those 2, let's say, ratios into what we call the total energy ratio, so a typical chiller plant, boiler plant has a TER, a total energy ratio of 2. A combined thermal system, like the ones I've described for these 3 examples, can have TERs up to 8. So we're talking 400% increase in efficiency without burning any fossil fuels at the site. And as we know, in parallel, the electricity grids are greening. In a future where all electricity is created from renewable sources, you can have basically heating and cooling being a net zero
Yeah, that's
thing.
true. Yeah, but that brings me to another thing, because a lot of people are talking about electrification. And personally, I don't really like the word electrification because it's often connected to one-to-one replacement. So in our industry, we often see electrification as like installing an e-boiler. That means that people are like, oh yeah, but then I move my gas to electricity. Well, heat pump is something that is electricity with energy efficiency. So I think we should come up with another word.
Thermal systems.
Sorry?
Thermal systems.
Thermal systems, yeah, but I think also here the governments won't understand it. You know, we need to find a way to also explain the policymakers what it is. They understand electrification, that means we move from gas to electricity. You know, COP, we all understand COP, but they won't understand the word COP. So we need to find a way to explain that implementation of a heat pump is something completely different than simple electrification.
I will propose you something, maybe.
I have no words, so I would, maybe that's a good one. So someone in the audience who has a good word for that, I would love to hear it, because this is also my problem. I have. You have, yes. Yeah, I can't hear. Can you? She will. Yeah, no, don't give the microphone. I like every suggestion. Aerification.
Instead of electrification, it's using a natural resource, essentially.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. But let's think about this, because I think this is what we need. I had also a discussion last week on the CO2 savings of a heat pump compared to the CO2 savings of an e-boiler. But if you take all the calculation methods, you will see that an e-boiler has a higher CO2 savings, even compared to the amount of money you put in. But I think we should look at the amount of CO2 savings per megawatt that is being put in, per energy source that is being put in. What do you think? What should be the best way to show that we all need heat pumps if we have a shortage of energy? Who has an answer? Maybe Dave.
And again, when we spoke about a shortage of energy and a heat pump is a viable application, then yes, indeed, you can get, and we heard about those coefficients, and we heard about those abilities to be able to drive the efficiency. I think the important thing here also that I would like to touch on, Anita, is that as we're using a heat pump and we're also having to increase the electrical usage, we've got many sources of renewable that can help us in reducing that electrical need. So I think it needs to be a little bit holistic, that says, so you move to you move to make a heat pump solution that's using more electricity. Now I have the option that I can use wind and solar from a PV perspective, and I can store some of that energy in order to run the technology as and when I need it.
Yeah,
Now
I know, but you know, installing an e-boiler does the same with wind and solar energy. So I think from residential heating point of view, I understand the problem of this net congestion. But the industry anyhow has this problem. With e-boilers, it's even bigger. So we need to have a solution that solves this net congestion problem of simple electrification. So we need to have another story here.
Yeah, I think maybe it's a bit repetitive, but I think we need to think of not a heat pump. We shouldn't think about boiler heat or electric heat as being replaced with a heat pump. We need to look at things at a system level and understand the customer's process, because in all industrial processes, or let's say the ones I've come across, 98% of them, there is always a cooling element to it. And when there's a cooling element to it, there's heat being rejected. And then the amount of incremental electricity that you're adding is it's not a linear thing. This is why the efficiencies really scale up so much. And so I think sometimes we explain it as, we're talking about it as a bigger problem than it may actually be.
What do you mean?
I mean that I don't think that moving away from boiler chiller plants in industrial buildings, in the majority of industrial buildings, is going to really ramp up the electricity use as much as we believe it will ramp it up. Because
but now you're talking about buildings, but
industrial buildings, factories that are making
processes.
Processes, yes.
Yeah.
Whether it's a car factory that has paint booths that need cooling, but they also need heating in this factory. And I can tell you, there's so many examples. They just create heat and they reject heat. And sometimes within walking distance of each other.
But if they don't need cooling, they only need heating.
Well, this is what I mean. There may be some situations where they only need heating, but we should not focus on the 10 or 5% of the time. Let's focus where we can make the change quickly and then go and deal with those things. Because if we can combine heating and cooling in 90% of industrial plants, that's already a big step forward.
But I do not agree, because we as paper industry don't cool at all. But I see that we can save 60% of energy with heat pumps. So please don't focus only on plants that have cooling and heating as well. So we need heating, we dry a lot. And we have an enormous amount of heat at 60 degrees. And so I would like to be helped as well. Sorry.
I personally agree with you, Anita, and I also agree with your view about heating and cooling, which is very efficient. On the other way around, where it's not possible to apply this concept, it's not said that you cannot apply a heat pump, for example. In fact, specifically for the paper mills, you have a lot of wastewater in a medium-low temperature range, and this does not need to be cooled down, forced, but you can use it as a heat source. Yeah. And the way I will propose you is that compared with an e-boiler, the heat pump is energy efficient via electrification. To me, this is how to complete the package. This is not a single word, I know. It's more a motto, but in some way it's self-explaining. Yeah.
Because I see it, in the Netherlands, I'm also chairing a heat integration platform with also the agro-food industry, the specialty chemical industry that have distillation plants that use a lot of heat also for evaporation of water. So what do you think, Dave? What is the potential for companies with distillation companies?
We see lots of applications, Anita, whereby the primary requirement is that heating source, like you said, whereby there is more of a heating need than a cooling need. I think maybe if I take the reverse of that and I think about a project again, whereby there was a large cooling need and then there wasn't so much of a heating need. And I'm thinking about a project that we completed up in Aalborg in Denmark, which was the Now Hospital. It's in Jutland in Denmark. So it's state-of-the-art hospital facility. In the hospital facility, they do have maybe large cooling requirement. They also had a small heating requirement, more so on the domestic heating. But what was put together there was effectively, firstly, there was a viable source of cooling whereby they could take an old chalk quarry, take the benefit of low temperature there, which again gave them an initial first stage of cooling. So they already started with an efficient system. They used that application whereby just bringing the temperature up marginally met their cooling needs within the building space. The heat that wasn't used in the facility was then used for adjacent customers or in a cooperative manner, whereby it's actually used wider out within the area on third level college and providing a heating source, again, more so from a district perspective. And well, as I said, while they didn't have that immediate heating need, they had the cooling application. The reverse scenario that is that we also saw applications whereby if there's a primary heating need, then you can also look at where you're getting those sources, whether that's geothermal. And I think when I brought it back earlier to the discussion about understanding the problem that you're looking to solve, you can find sources where rather than this one-to-one ratio, you can find sources whereby you've already got a heat source or a cooling source that's driving that efficiency. Yes. But I agree, there is many applications that have a heating need, and you may not need the cooling in the local vicinity, but you can find an adjacent in a cooperative manner. No, data centers is a great example that have a constant cooling need plus other applications. Yeah.
Well, I have also experienced that there was a company wanting to indeed give their waste heat for district heating, and then they found out that the company wanted to use heat pumps and then upgrade the heat and for district heating. Therefore, if you are upgrading the heat to that temperature, I want to have it back myself. And so I think the industry is quite often not aware of what heat pumps can do. So most of the people with plans to give the waste heat to the district heating want to have the heat back for their own heating purposes, and not, I think, for the buildings, but for the processes, in fact. The question is, of course, here for me also is like, if I want heat pumps, for example, I would like to have heat pumps, well, I want 20 heat pumps of 50 megawatts. When can you deliver?
We can deliver to 8 weeks from now, if you give me an order now.
So you do not have a problem with production?
No.
And what about installation?
No. And this is a great point you bring up, right? And again, it goes back to really segmenting this whole topic of electrification of heating, because if the barriers to changing the industry in industrial and commercial is very low, because a big company like us, we have huge scale in making cooling equipment. And we service it and we install it. If I stop making cooling equipment and I only make cooling and heating equipment, all the infrastructure is exactly the same. The factory doesn't change, the sales organization doesn't change, the service organization doesn't change, just the product has maybe different pipes, whatever. So, like for me, I would be very happy not to make any more chillers anymore and make all equipment that does heating and cooling, because I can sell those at a higher price. And I use all my existing infrastructure and it's great leverage. So I think we have to be very careful, because on the residential side, the barrier to entries are quite high because the technology is very different. You have wall-hung boilers, you have a different type of installer, different network, and there it all has to change. But on the industrial side, all the infrastructure can be used to do the same thing, because the technology is not that much different.
But it's a really important message, because well, we see that a lot of rebuilds in industry are being delayed because of the delivery of equipment, and especially chips, etc. Aren't you facing these problems as well?
Like I said, we have 8-week lead times on whether we make really a chiller or we make a heat pump or we make a multi-pipe machine. And you know, our friend Christian here is a great supplier of us, and I think they provide materials to us, and we have other suppliers. And generally speaking, it's about today we're only making cooling equipment. We obviously make a lot more heating equipment today as well. But for me, you know, if there's going to be, you have to think of it like the automotive sector. You have big companies making, internal combustion engine cars. These cars are going to phase down, and phase up are the electric vehicles, but it's the same companies that are going to make them, right? And it's going to be the same in our industry, in the industrial space and the commercial space. In the residential, it's different, right? Because there's a lot of bigger hurdles to overcome there, but I'm sure they will be overcome as well.
Yeah.
Maybe one
yes.
point, Anita, that I would just add to, and I think in the private industry, we're aware now that customers are planning and they've made commitments from a decarbonisation perspective, or to get to net zero at a particular point, whether that's 2030, 2040 in some cases. But we also got these large, we touched on district heating, and we spoke about public-private partnership. And if there's one thing that I would also touch on there in terms of the whole planning application, tendering application, I think what we can learn is that needs to be more agile or efficient, I would say. So manufacturers in the industry can understand, one, what the demand will look like, but two, be ready and build that scale and circumnavigate that long process, I would say, around public tendering, access to funding. And yet we hear lots about green bonds, we hear lots about funding from a European perspective. And I think that just needs to be made easier to access in order to be able to accelerate this transition.
Definitely true, yeah. But then we also, because we heard earlier also this afternoon, like the technology is there, well, you can deliver fast, but it also needs to be implemented. And we may need to change our processes quite a bit. Who helps you in that?
I think,
yes, Andrea, maybe.
Yeah, I think that to change fast the process, we need a strong technical background from a client perspective to be capable to rethink about their process.
Yes.
And from a manufacturer perspective, there are a lot of different cases possible. You can either use your traditional standardized unit, I mean heat pump, or you can custom made a solution for the specific client. So big topic to answer here.
Yeah, but quite often it's not only just a heat pump. They have to redo the whole piping. You need to combine it with some steam compression. You need to do a complete other way of controlling the pressures that are needed. Do you have the expertise? Do you have, companies you work with?
I would say that from Turboden perspective, yes, we have that kind of mindset. It's came from our 40-year history, and we did it several times in different fields. On the other way around, we need to think about these kind of projects as a project that then are lasting for decades, because we don't need to focus on mainly on the short terms, but on the long term of an industry that once implement a heat pump can benefit about the output for decades.
For the others too.
Yes.
And I would just like to touch on that, Anita, maybe that I think, we classify that when you say, do companies have a solution? And we like to refer to it as more of a sustainable infrastructure as opposed to just narrowing down from a heat pump perspective. Because to your point, there is a level of infrastructure, whether that's mechanical and electrical. I think what's important there is that control strategy, or to be able to, if you're using a renewable source along with your heat pump, you need to understand when you best use your renewable in order to be able to either store that. So it is an ecosystem. And I think what's important is that manufacturers take a broader look here and take an approach on a sustainable infrastructure rather than just selling a product. This isn't a product sale. It needs to be a solution-based sale, I would say, in order to make it easy or take that pain away from customers.
Yeah. But then sometimes you may also see that the industry may need to change that process in a way that you can better utilize heat pumps to get a higher efficient situation. Yes.
Yes, and this is not just a benefit for the supplier that is selling a new unit, but for the client at the end.
True.
So it typically makes sense to rethink about that. So a sort of history lesson I received back some years ago is that back 100 and more years ago, the problem was how to do things. Then the new problem was how to do things efficiently. And now the new problem is how to do things efficiently and carbon zero. So if we want to convey this message, we need to work on that. And I see that clients are more and more looking into these aspects for their daily business. So I'm convinced that this will work, and this is a strong part for the future.
Yes. And I would like also to ask you to do part of this rethinking for them, because, you know, they have been doing their process already for many, many years. They're educated to do their process that way, and it's really difficult for them to rethink. And I think you, as really, well, heat and cooling specialists, are better to ask them critical questions about whether the way they do it now is the most efficient way to do things. So, but anyhow, we are almost out of time for this session. So I would like to finalize this session. So, well, after this whole discussion, again, asking the same question as I did in the beginning, again, 1 to 2 sentences. What is your most important message to, then, in this case, the industry for using heat pumps? I'll start with Jose.
Yes, so for me, the most important message is that it's something that can be done and will be done, and it's really up to all of us to make it happen and accelerate it. And it's now not just a question of decarbonizing, but it's also a question of security. So I think we need to continue to spread our message and maybe bring in people who weren't in the discussion before, who maybe weren't too interested in decarbonization, but are interested in security. And the more we talk about it, the more it's going to happen. But the important thing is to know that it is happening and it will continue to accelerate.
Thank you. Christian.
Yeah, but I will hook on to that and say, as we have heard the examples here, we have the technologies ready, right? So we can go and implement. And then maybe a small wish that we make the reuse of waste heat mandatory to really push the industry.
That's an interesting one. Thank you. And Andrea?
No story now. I would say heat pump for carbon neutrality, and then not only, but also helping business plan for customer, so for industry.
Yeah, thank you. And before going to Dave, you talked about security. I think we should also talk about security of energy supply, because that is where heat pumps can help. Yes. If we won't have heat pumps, we will never have sufficient energy for the whole world. And then Dave has the final one.
And I would say, just building on that, Anita, this is a journey that everybody's going on. We shouldn't fear it. We should embrace it. There is lots of technologies using and leveraging lots of refrigerant solutions, including natural solutions. My advice and my encouragement is, let's embrace it. There is technology out there. It is more resilient. And let's believe that it's a journey. And I do believe that we can go on that journey and address it in stages to get to that net zero position.
Okay, thank you. Let's embrace it.
Thank you.